Hey guys, what's up? So in the previous video, I did say that it's going to be the last one in this React series, but then I got an idea for a new video. So here I am. So just to give you a rundown of what we're going to do today, there's something known as context API in ReactJS, which basically allows you to store your application state in a central store. So for example, in our state for our app right now, we have to do's, is dialog open, is edit mode, edit to do, priority filter, and all that stuff. But the thing is, we are passing down these props, this state as props to a lot of our components. And right now, you can as it is see that we need these at multiple places. And our application is really simple, to be honest, because if you see, we just add a to do, that's it, and then we can edit a to do. Yeah, but this is a pretty simple example. And if you think like if you had another and right now in a to-do list component, or to-do is just inside this. I didn't even make it a separate component. Now you can think, if it was a separate component, then you would be passing down the props to it too. So this basically is a concept known as prop drilling, which means you're passing down props multiple levels just to get the data to your components. You're just playing hot potato with your data, as somebody put it. So context API can solve a lot of those problems for you. So for while playing around with context API, I prepared a small example for you guys. It has this dark mode, light mode toggle with context API, and these items are coming from the context, not directly from the state. So what I've thought is, first I'll walk you guys through this example and explain context API. So for if somebody's here just for the explanation, you can watch until I do explain this example, and rest is up to you. And after that, we're going to see how we can refactor this code to use context API. So that being said, I'll put timestamps in the description so that you guys can jump around. Now let's start with the explanation for this. So context API helps you create just a central place where you can store certain data. So you can see, like under the src folder over here, I have this context folder, and I have context, item context, and theme context. So let's take a look. Under item context, you see we have imported create context from React. So and we are exporting this item context, saying it as create context, and then we are exporting an item provider, which is just a component sort of, and we are extracting the children from its prop using just component restructuring. And as you see in our normal methodology, like we do use state, here we are putting use state inside this item provider, and in the return statement we are going to return item context, which you have defined over here, dot provider. So this is something that you're getting directly from React, and as value inside curly braces we are passing it an array which is items and set items, right? So basically here's our item context, here's the item provider. Item context creates a context for us. Item provider is going to help us provide that context to our children components. So let's take a look at app.js. Over here we have imported item provider from item context, right? And then we have wrapped it around all the rest of our elements. So basically item provider is just going to take these elements and render them with, while also providing the context to them. And if we take a look at item list, how do we use our context? How do we access it? So to access it, we just have to import the context. So keep in mind, like in app.js, we imported item provider, but in the place that we have to use it, we are importing item context, and then we say the use context. It's just a hook from React that you can import like this, similar to use state, and just like that we have access to items and set items. And now I can just map over those items using the thing that I got back from context, and that's basically it. So to give you another rundown, I'm gonna show you how we did it with theme context. So for the theme context, I just have a state initially it's light by default, and it's set to like normal use state pattern, theme, set theme, and then like in item we provided item and set item, we are passing it theme and set theme this time. The difference is here we wanted to have access to theme context in our app component as well. So which means we had to wrap it a level above. So if you go into index.js, what I've done is usually this theme provider isn't there. There's just the app component that you see usually in index.js. But what I did was I wrapped the app component with theme provider. So now app also has access to the theme context basically, and right over here the app component accesses the theme context, gets the variable into the theme, and then just applies the theme class to uh, our web app base or app component, because that class is basically toggling the background. So let me show you the uh, styles. Right around the bottom I have .app.dark. So if a component has both the classes, make its background as this linear gradient. So this is what's helping us to toggle the theme. And I've done similar things for item.dark, total.dark. So you see this one, we have this little line of text over here, which is there are two items. I click it, then it gets a little more lighter, so that it looks better on the dark background. So that's about it for the explanation for it. I have this repo where I have this example, so I'll link this in the description and you guys can take a look and play around. Yeah, that's about it for this. So now let's get back to implementing this into our app, and I'm going to start piece by piece. What that means is, let's break down our state. So I don't want to get to to-dos or set to-dos right now. So first, let's see at what all places or is dialog open is being used, even if it's worth to you pass it as a context, or will it do fine with just the state. Let's see. So we're just passing it to one component, and it's being toggled from that component only. So I don't think is dialog open needs to go into the context, because it's a pretty isolated thing, right? We can put it into context if we want, but I don't see the worth over here. Next, let's see. uh, After is dialog open, we have is edit mode. So let's see where all do we pass it. Let's do a quick string search. Is edit mode. So again, this is also just being passed to the form dialog component. uh, so I don't think it's needed to extract it into context. Alright, so after is edit mode, we have edit to do. So we are handling edit click like this. And let's get back to it. Priority filter. So I think rather than overthinking this, we can make one state context and put all these state variables into uh, that one context, and we'll have another to-dos context for these to-dos. So let's get started by making a context folder, and one else is state context.js. Alright, so here we have to import React, and we need to import create context, and we need to import use state. Cool. from React. So let's see. First, we'll have one state context and set it to just say create context. React will do its magic behind the scenes, and then we're going to have a component called state provider. And I realized state context isn't the best descriptive name for this context, but I can't think of anything better right now. So from its props, we only need its children prop. Why can't I try? Cool. So first, let's just get done with this return statement, and then let's see what all do we need in it. So we'll say state context dot provider, and here in value, whatever we pass will be accessible through the context, right? So right now I'm just going to pass hi, so we can test it a bit. Now I need to import it, so what I'll do is import state provider, because again, when we are first setting it up, we need to wrap the elements around with the provider, and then when we are accessing it inside the elements, we can use the context to access it. So from dot slash context slash state context, yeah, and now we just need to wrap it up. We can say state provider so we are wrapping all the elements that we need access in with the state provider, that we need access to state context in with the state provider. So I was using a fragment early on. I don't think I need that now. Yeah, I hope this doesn't break anything. Let's see, because I just learned about context a couple days ago, and I had a lot of problems getting it to work early on. So I'm just hoping nothing breaks, and seems like it did. Let's see what's wrong. We'll open the React Dev tools and get started from there. I think let's just try wrapping it around the container rather. Setting the fragment over here. But this will mean that our form dialog component won't have access to it, so we can just put it below our form dialog component and above the container. And again, we'll just indent a bit. It's not necessary, but it looks better. Yeah. So now let's see, let's save and see if it shows up correctly. It has for some reason wiped away all of my app. Let's see if we take away state provider, then what happens. And our app shows up as before, but why the hell would that happen? let's take a look over here. It seems like Material UI itself is using a lot of contexts to render the dialog component. No, not the dialog component, the drag drop context. So the library that we integrated in our last video, React Beautiful DND, it's also using a lot of context. Um, but I'm stumped on why wrapping it in context wiped away whole of my app. So material UI React context. How about instead of doing it over here, I can do it in index.js and hope that works. I don't think that this is the best way to do it, but let's give it a shot. State provider. Alright, what the hell? Did I forget to render the children inside state context? Yeah, it was my dumbness that caused this error. So, as you must have remembered, um, that we extracted this children from the props and we had to render it over here. So I basically spent a ton of time because I made a silly mistake. So let's take this away now and put this back in the app where it was. Sorry guys, that must have hurt for you to see me do for 5 minutes because that was such a dumb mistake. I think many of you would be screaming at me through the screens. So we're back to where we were, state provider. Yep. And now I see no reason why it won't work. And it works. And as you can see, we have the state provider over here and props, new prop. Alright, so we have this context provider and it has this value hi. So yeah, so the value is getting passed. Alright, so now let's get to setting up all the state properly in our context. So I'm just gonna straight up copy all of this and put it over here. And in the value we are going to have a object and say is dialog open is going to be the array and we're going to do similar for all the other ones. You will see how this will factor in a minute, in a few minutes, not in a minute. I don't know for sure if I can do this all under one video, so if not, this is going to turn into a two-part thing. Alright, so now that we have our values set up, just a second. Is edit to do and is not defined, set priority filter. Okay, I just made a small typo. This has to be small and this has to be set edit to do. Alright, so our context works fine, and this all is going to be broken for a while, so don't worry about that. Now let's break it down, because this code base has grown a lot, so I'm not even sure how can we tame this beast basically. So as you can see, we're going to need priority filter inside app as well. So what we can do is either make this into another component or wrap the state context around the app in index.js. The better approach would be to make this another component, but for now I'm just gonna comment it out. Alright, so let's start from the top. Header component is handle dialog open. So now it's not being passed that, so it might be an issue. It is an issue. So what we're going to do is import use context right over here, and then we're going to import our context state context. Again, I'm reminding you guys again and again, when we are providing the values, we use the state provider, and now that we're about to consume the value, we're importing the state context. State context, and over here I'm going to say use context state context and it just only needs is dialog open. So what I'm going to do is dialog open, and set is dialog open. I'm going to just pluck it out from the state dot state dot is dialog open. Yeah, that should do the trick. So now that we have access to these, I don't think we're going to be able to console.log because our stuff hasn't compiled. So here on click for the fab button, that is our plus button that we saw before, we're saying handle fab click. But what we can do is simply just use is dialog open, set is dialog open to true. And if we go back to our app.js, let us just see what our function handle dialog open was doing. Yeah, it's just setting is dialog open to true. We don't need this function anymore, so I'm just gonna straight up delete it. It's just gonna give us more errors which are going to magically go away soon. Yeah, so now that that's handled, now let's take a look at drag drop context is going to stay here for a while. Now we'll take away all of this. We're not going to handle priority, filter, edit, click, whatever. We're also going to take away to-dos, because now that I think of it, until we make the to-dos into a context, it's going to be difficult to make this work. And yeah. Alright, I see that open, handle dialog close. We don't need any of this right now. I guess this video would be more boring for a lot of you guys because it's just me deleting a bunch of code and writing it another way and dealing with all these errors, because to be honest, I am also quite lost on this code base now. Yeah, that's not nice. So now let's first just handle how to display the to-dos. Basically, we're going to create another context, say to-do context.js, and I'm just going to copy over the state context first. Yeah, let's paste it in here. Now we need to rename this to to-do context, to-do provider. We don't need any of the state, and in the values there's just going to be to-dos. I guess I could have just slammed in the to-do like these to-dos and set to-dos inside the other context as well, but I didn't think that it belongs over there. This deserves a context of its own. To-do context dot provider, to-do context dot provider. Yeah, and now in the to-do list component, we're not taking in any props. Let's we need to import use context, and then we can say const to-dos and set to-dos is equal to use context to-do context, and we are getting back these values to-dos and set to-dos because we are passing it in as value inside a to-do provider. So this is what we got to do. We're going to have a ton of issues right now. Import to-do context from dot slash context slash to-do context, and then the last step would be to import it right over here. To-do provider from to-do provider. Yep, and then we just gotta wrap it around, similar to state provider. All right. So now let's go back to to-do list component. and we are also going to need to have const state is equal to use context state context, put it in state context state context. Alright, now instead of props, like over here we have props.todos, we don't need that. We just say todos.filter. We're also going to get priority filter. I'm just taking a note of what all stuff we're going to need. So let's just make a comment over here that what all stuff we need to get out of a context for this component. Yeah, so we need to-dos, we need priority filter, and that's it so far. Let's go deeper. Cool. To dot in. To dot var. We'll have to set priority filter over here. Set priority filter to dot priority. Earlier on we were past that method function through props, but not now. And here as well, handle delete to do. I'm just making a comment over here right now. And this is also going to be something that we need to do now. Handle edit click. And then handle mark done. Cool. So it's a lot of work now, but I guess it's worth it because it will help us learn much more better about context API. Okay, so let's start. From the state, first we're going to get priority filter and set priority filter is equal to state. And right now I have no way of knowing if what I'm doing is right or wrong. I'm just going with my instinct. Yeah. So now that we have priority filter, then okay, never mind. I'm just going to comment out all of this code for a minute. And I don't think that's gonna work. Never mind. It's getting a little overwhelming now. So set priority filter is handled. Then we need to handle delete to do. So for that we have access to set to dos. Now what we need to do is set to dos to todos.filter. We are giving it t, and t dot id is not equal to todo dot id. So it's just going to loop over and filter out the to-dos, filter out the one to-do that will have the id as t.id equal to to-do, like the current id. So that's how we handle delete. Then I'll leave handle for a bit. and then we need to handle mark done. So what we need to do is const t todos dot find todos dot find, and in find we need to pass in t. We need to find the to do with the same id. Now that we have t, we can say no. First of all, we're going to need a const new to dos, and it's going to be just a spread of the previous one. And here we're going to say new to dos, because we can't mutate state directly, right? And then when we find it, we just need to say t dot done is equal to not t dot done. We're basically flipping the switch, and then set to dos as new to dos. Cool. Now that we have this handled, now think about what we need to do for edit. So let's go over into our state context. So through the state context, we have to handle a lot of things. So we're going to need all of these basically in our todolist component for the edit functionality. I'm just taking out all these state values from the state like this. It's a pretty tedious task to refactor all this to use the context API, but it's worth it. Alright, now that we have those values, I want to take a peek into app.js, how were we handle edit click. So where was handle edit click? Yeah, so we need to set is dialog open to true, is edit mode to true, and set edit to do to do. Alright, so let's get to that. Oh, I just made a typo over here. It needs to be set edit to use. Okay, so let's think about it. When we click for edit, we need to set is edit mode to true. Then we need to say is dialog open, that's also true. And then we need to say edit to do to specify which to do do we want to edit. We'll set it to do, and this has to be set edit to do. Oh god, cool. Now let's get back to our app.js and clean up a bit. We can take away all this code. Cool. Alright, we need to run this use effect as well. We'll think about it later on. Let's just copy this over to a to-do context, to a state context. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but it's worth retry. Alright, now after todolist component, what's the next component that we need to handle? So we need to handle form dialog component. Cool. So here's our form dialog component, and inside this we have a form component. Cool. So we would need to do the same exercise over here. I'll copy that over. And we just need to import both the contexts, state context from dot slash context slash state context, and then copy this over and say to context. And I think in a state context we also need to import use effect. This screen is giving me that error. Okay, back to form dialog context. Now we have all this data. We don't need props. So for dialog open, we need to pass it is dialog open, and for hand close, let's see. Okay, we don't need to do anything for handle close. We can just say set is dialog open to false, and then we can just say props. We can remove props, and again it says on click handle close. We just need to say set is dialog open to false over here as well. I forgot this needs to be an arrow function, not a straight up function call. Yep. Now let's go into the form component. What do we have in the edit model? Oh, this was from before. I forgot to delete it. This was from before we were using Material UI. Okay, so in a form component, we pretty much need to handle all that through just formic. So we're going to have to find a way to get formic into one of the contexts too. So let's get back to our checklist. To-do-list component is sorted, form dialog component is sorted, header component is sorted, app.js has tons of errors. We can just comment this out if this would let me. Then we can comment this piece out. Then we can comment this piece out. Because right now I don't think the functionality will be working fine, but it won't be, of course, because we don't have the on submit right now, but it should at least show something right now. No, it won't show something right now because formic as well. Let on drag end be here. Okay, so for on drag end, it needs access to to-dos. So what I'll do is make this to-do provider into app.js, into index.js. Because as you saw in the app.js, we have on drag end function that handles dragging logic. So for that, we need to have access to our to-dos. Alright, and I just need to remove this from here. Cool. Now it should get back to its original error. What the hell? And we need to import use context, and here we're going to say const to-dos is equal to use context to-do context, and we need to import it to-do context. Cool. This will give us access to the to-dos as well in app.js so that our handle drag end function can do the needful. Now the last step is to handle submit with formic. So this is going to be a tricky one, but let's see. How do we do this? Set to-dos is not defined. App.js line 123. It's going to need access to that as well. So just a second. I feel I have a very strong intuition that we're not going to be able to do this today or whenever. This is just going to give us a shit ton of issues. Anyway, we'll look into it later on. Now we were passing formic into the props dot formic like that, but we need some other way to make this all play along well. So we need another context called formic context.js, and import react comma create context from react, and then import use formic from formic. Alright, now we need to export const formic context. You will do create context and then export const formic provider to same pattern as before. Return formic context dot provider and between these we need to render the children, and up here as a value we'll pass down formic. Now let's jump back to app.js and grab that code. Alright, now we are passing formic, and let's get access to this inside the form dialog component. Const formic is equal to use context formic context, and we need to import the context. And then in app.js we need to import the provider for this. And now let's wrap around our elements. So formic provider is only going to be needed by form dialog component. No, it's going to be needed by every one of them, man. So formic provider formic provider. Cool. It says get current date is not defined. We'll copy this over app.js. Let's get rid of this first. This was for handling local storage. We did it before. I don't have any interest in doing it now. So command X, take it over to formic context. Yeah. Now that's defined. This is not going to let us complete this one. This nasty error. So we have got access to formic. Now we'll just pass it down like this, and then on click we need to handle submit, and let's define a function over here called const handle submit, and let's grab this code from app.js because it's going to be pretty similar. Let's go back to form dialog component, handle submit. Alright, so this should work as it is because we have access to all these over here. What did I export over here now? Now let's get back over here and let's see where did we mess up. Oh no. Else. Yep. Now that's done. It says UUID is not defined. So we'll import it. Let me just check if that's how we imported it in app.js. No, it's called React UUID. All right. So let's get back to our checklist. We can remove this, and then we need this use effect. We'll add this use effect inside our form dialog component. It says props is not defined. That should solve it. Why does it say form dialog component is neither a function component or a custom React hook? How is it not a function component? It is a function component. Something's wrong with this. Our thing should be working now. Let's see what can Google give us. Nothing. It's saying that form dialog component is just a function. That's what our error message is saying. That React hook use context is called in a function form dialog component, which is neither a React function component or a custom React hook function. Okay, but why does it think that this is not a function component when it is? Let's say if we take in props, does it make it a function component? Oh god, this is worrying. Never mind guys, I'm going to leave it at this because I'm not able to figure out what silly mistake, what dumb mistake have I made that it's not letting me call use context inside this form dialog component when it very much is a functional component. It is a functional component. We're using it as inside app.js like this. It was working before. Here's our form dialog component. I have no idea what's the issue with this. Guys, again, I'm sorry for this being such a long video and still we are not able to figure this out, but I hope the explanation for context API in the starting of this video helped you all. And I don't know, I think I'll have to revert back to previous version of this code. I have that on my Git repo. So let's see guys. Alright, for now, bye bye, and I'll link the Git repo for this example that we had. Sorry, I pushed away the screen now. For the example that we had for context API, that will be in the description, so be sure to check that out. Alright guys, see ya.